This episode is sponsored by Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in West Virginia. Featured entertainment includes Randy Houser on May 31st and Keb Mo on June 1st. Details and tickets at HollywoodCasinoCharlestown.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino floor and attend a show. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Country singer-songwriter Maggie Rose returns home to perform live at the Ram's Head in Annapolis, Maryland on Friday, followed by the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia on Sunday. She joined me to discuss growing up in Potomac, Maryland, and making the journey to Nashville to perform at the Grand Ole Opry over 100 times. Hey, Maggie Rose. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Yeah, I grew up in the area, so I've listened to lots of WTOP in my life.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
We love it. Yeah, I grew up in Potomac, Maryland, and that was one of my presets. So it's good to be talking to you guys.
That's awesome. Now, of course, you've appeared at the Grand Ole Opry, gosh, over like 100 times by now in Nashville. But is it nice to come back home to, Ram's Head, Annapolis, Birchmere, Alexandria, some familiar faces in the crowd?
Absolutely. And I mean, I love those venues, but it's also just nice to come home. My whole family is still up there. And I feel like I've had a really great fan base that's stuck with me since I moved to Nashville 16 years ago, and it just keeps growing. So we're ready to come back with the new tour.
That's awesome. And this tour is with the brand new album just came out, gosh, in April, like last month. It's called No One Gets Out Alive. And tell our listeners some of the heavy hitters that you brought in to play on this. We got some Jason Isbell band members, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the benefits of having been in this town for so long, is I've accumulated some really talented friends. And Ben Tanner produced this album. He also produced my last album that I recorded at Fame Studios called Have a Seat. And Ben was one of the members of Alabama Shakes. He's become a wonderful confidant and friend and helped me put together this crazy band of musicians like Sadler Vaden and Chad Gamble of the 400 Unit. I had Zach Cockrell, also one of the Shakes with Ben when they were a band. Peter Levin, who's played with Amanda Shires and the Allman Brothers. I had members of my own touring band, Caitlin Connor and Kyle Lewis, who are so pro. And Don Hart, he's kind of like a legendary music arranger here in Nashville. He's worked with Fish and Trey Anastasio. He oversaw the whole tracking process and put together all the string arrangements for the album.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's like an all-star lineup putting together this album. Well, let's do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the actual songs on it, if you don't mind. Like, take me into the title track, No One Gets Out Alive. Is the theme. I assumed, making the most of the time we're here, living in the now kind of a thing.
Absolutely. And I made this project, it's worth mentioning, before I signed with the label that I'm with now, Big Loud. So I was making something just because I wanted to. I had to. And because I feel like that's our vocation, to make beautiful music regardless of what's going on. And with that song, No One Gets Out Alive, on its own, without context, it kind of sounds ominous and dark, but it's about just what you said. It's the urgency and the preciousness of life and the finite amount of time we have. And I wrote it with Natalie Hemby, who's a very formidable writer in town, one of the 4 members of the High Women, and Sunny Sweeney,
nice.
who's also a really accomplished artist. And I took this title to them, and we just started talking about our experiences as musicians in Nashville, and how hard but beautiful it is that we get to do what we love. And with the pandemic, my livelihood and so many other artists and so many people in all different fields, it was threatened, but it was about gratitude and pushing forward regardless. And there's lots of themes of healing and forgiveness and, trying to find catharsis when relationships fall apart and there's no closure. So I think all in all, it's an album that's just about being grateful for where I am at my point in life.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, yeah, let's devote a little more time to a couple of the other songs, if you don't mind. How about Mad Love? I read that you were thinking of a little bit of like a Tarantino badass, like a Beatrix Kiddo and Kill
Yeah,
Bill. My wife and I just watched Kill Bill, actually. So when I read that, I was like, that's
I
hilarious.
just watched both with my husband like yesterday, and it was because it's been just years and years since I watched it, and
Yeah.
I forgot that they don't reveal her name until like the very end of volume two.
Yeah, she just
Um,
we watched both two back to back, and
yeah,
she's just the bride in the first one, and then by the second
right.
one, you're like, oh yeah, Beatrix Kiddo. All right, but yeah, how does that
Yeah.
tie into the song?
Well, sonically, I feel like Tarantino always has such incredible soundtracks, but there's definitely with those two movies in particular, almost like this Western
Yeah.
Lee Hazelwood, Nancy Sinatra kind of vibe. And I wrote this song actually a few years ago. It was the only song on this current project that was written outside of this 6 month time frame. And it was this awesome, fearless character that I was writing about, but not entirely ready to embody on the last project. And I felt like with this project and the sense of self that I feel like I've arrived at, I was ready to incorporate this on the album. And I thought musically it just fit so beautifully with the cinematic feel of so many of these songs. And on Mad Love in particular, which I wrote with K.S. Rhodes and Sad Penny, two great artists in Nashville, I had a 64-piece orchestra from
Whoa.
Macedonia play the arrangement that Don put together for that. So I feel like we really did get to follow through with this big anthemic cinematic piece that maybe would be worthy of a Tarantino soundtrack.
I like that cinematic sound songwriting. I like that. One more.
Yeah,
How about Fake Flowers?
absolutely. Well, Fake Flowers, I love. I feel like it's our single right now, and it's one of those songs that I really look forward to singing in the set because I feel like on previous projects, I've sort of softened the edges a little bit of anger or grief or, whatever those feelings that we're kind of told not to demonstrate too often are. And I'm giving myself permission to just go there. And I think that people like to see that live. They like to hear the dynamic of it in the recording. It's almost like a little reckless and messy and um I'm indulging in those emotions that I wrote those songs from. And I wrote that song with Chuck Harmony and Claude Kelly, who are in a duo called Lewis York. And they've written so many songs for like all these divas. Like we wrote a song for Jessie J together. They've written a song for Whitney Houston and Miley Cyrus and Britney Spears. So they really have that like big diva vocal melody strength down.
Wow.
And I think all those components together with what I wanted to write about and our abilities to collaborate amounted to a pretty cool song.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks for giving. I mean, that's a pretty deep dive into the new album. But I want to sort of circle back to the hometown hero kind of stuff because whenever we have local people that made it big out of this area, we love talking about it. So you said you were born in Potomac, Maryland, late '80s or so. Like what high school?
I went to Georgetown Visitation,
Okay.
which it is a prep school, all girls, women of faith, vision, and purpose is what we say. And it was a tough, academically super challenging school, which I think I'm grateful now that I had that experience. But yeah, I drive into Georgetown from Potomac every day, hence the opportunity to listen to WTOP.
There you go.
And I went to Clemson for a year and a half, studying vocal performance, majoring in that before I got signed to Universal and moved to Nashville when I was 19.
19.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Did you perform around this area even before that though? Like, wasn't it like a Springsteen cover band or something locally?
yes, yeah, you did your homework. I got introduced to the hardest working band, B Street Band. They're out of Toms River, New Jersey. I got introduced to them by Tom Natelli, who is a well-known real estate developer in the area, but also he's expanded to even Nashville and other parts of the country. And he and his wife have a son that was in my class growing up, and he just always was a big fan of me singing at Christmas recitals and church and around the community. And up until he connected me with the B Street Band, I really didn't have any opportunity to play at like a bar for people who are trying to escape into music and embody all those other things that make a great performer and not just being a good singer. So the B Street Band kindly let me perform with them, and Tom and Karen helped me so much in my early years in Nashville to just get my footing and propel my career forward. But
Wow.
Glenn Stewart from the B Street Band just passed away, and it was actually a couple weeks before the album came out, and that just took me back to the meaning of this record, of how precious life is. And I know that without his tutelage and endorsement of me and the rest of the band's endorsement of me, I probably wouldn't have fallen in love with live performing the way that I did.
Wow. Wow. Well, rest in peace, but at least, brings it full circle and highlights the theme of the album for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly.
all right. So you moved to Nashville. I'm trying to go somewhat chronologically and catch everyone up. So you moved to Nashville at 19, signed with Universal Republic around like 2009-ish. And then I guess a lot of people probably first heard you doing the Kings of Leon cover of You Somebody. But you were Maggie Durant, still your last name at that point, right? It wasn't you weren't going by Maggie Rose. You had it was right as Maggie Durante at that point, right?
Yeah, I was still government name Margaret Durante,
Durante.
and
No relation to Jimmy, right? Jimmy
no
Durante,
relation to
Frosty
Jimmy,
the
but
Snowman.
no, he was a funny guy, but yeah, no
Yeah, no
relation.
relation.
Um, I feel like I wanted to reclaim just my story. I was thrown into the system of Nashville and Music Row and the way that things are done here, and especially the commercial country world. And it felt almost too hasty in the beginning. Like I think every artist who's releasing music should have an opportunity to explore and experiment, find their sound, and attain those life experiences that make you worth listening to. And I had gone through a pretty tumultuous first couple of years and decided that I wanted to draw a line in the sand and have a really intentional career. And I went by Maggie Rose to give myself that opportunity to start a fresh chapter. And I feel like every album I've released since then has just been a further stage of evolution in me finding out who I am and what I want to say and how I want to connect with the audience.
Absolutely. So with the new rebrand of Maggie Rose, you released the country album, the first country album, 2012, Cut to Impress, and it had a couple of singles that folks might remember. Tell us about I Ain't Your Mama, and sort of sort of the theme of that. What does it say about today's generation of men, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it was more I was more focused on my independence, and it's less
Yeah.
of a statement on
Right.
men. And I don't think they're incompetent or anything, but I think at that point in a relationship you want to find someone who wants to have a good partner and not someone who's going to take care of you. And I just thought it was funny and sassy. I liked the sort of funky sonic element to it, compared to what I was hearing on the radio from women a lot at the time. And I just felt like it was a cool, unique
Yeah.
perspective that a lot of women tended to agree with.
Yeah. You want to be equal partners.
Certainly not feeling like I had to be overly polite.
Right, exactly. And then also Better was on there too, which is more of a sad if I Ain't Your Mama was fun and sassy, Better was was a grieving, drinking booze to try to feel better kind of a song. Country music is filled with, drinking songs and grieving songs like that, but heartbreaker songs, tearjerker songs. But yeah, memories of putting that song together.
Well, that was a song. I didn't write that song. I write all my own material for the subsequent albums. But
Right.
I had three friends who wrote that song that I was close to, and all of them had pretty specific painful experiences that they were drawing from, addiction and heartbreak, divorce, those big life events that they all collaborated together and wrote about. And just knowing their story and knowing how that song hit me hearing it for the first time, I felt like, all right, I have to give this song a life and record it because it had been sitting around uncut in Nashville for a while. And there's certainly some bravery in having to be the person singing those lyrics because it's so vulnerable. But the stories that I got back from people who heard that and how generous they were with what that song meant to them, everyone had a very different and specific way in which the song hit them. And I got to hear a lot of those stories from people, which just made the weight and gravity of all of the exercise of putting songs out a little more profound.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I won't make you go through all the songs on all the albums, but so how can we catch it up all the way to the present? Let's do it this way. How did you think you evolved from second album, change the whole thing, to third album, to have a seat, to the new one? Like, is there a way to kind of, it's a lot of ground to cover, but how do you think you evolved?
Well, I think, I'm proud of Cut to Impress, but I do think that even though this is the fourth album, it feels like a beginning. And with Cut to Impress, that was almost like a Frankenstein kind of album because it was split between two producers. I didn't really have the wherewithal to put the band together that I did on this project. I was definitely still deferential to the way things were done. And not to say that, I won't play ball, but I've got full autonomy now. And the way that I made this record was exactly on my own terms. The subject matter is extremely personal, whereas on previous records, I would have probably spoken more from like the collective we. On No One Gets Out Alive, it's very individual. And that was a bit of an exercise in vulnerability, but I was ready for the challenge and welcomed it. And I feel like I got a lot of healing in creating this project.
Awesome. Yeah, well, it's getting, you're getting some write-ups in Rolling Stone magazine. It's getting some buzz out there. So I'm glad that you were able to call in before coming to Annapolis and Alexandria. That's awesome. I guess sort of bringing it full circle in the final seconds, like we mentioned at the top, you've played the Grand Ole Opry like over 100 times. So I'm sure they all probably run together, and it's an honor every time, obviously. But is there one that comes to mind that it's hard to pick, but that stands out of like where you shared the stage maybe with some huge legends at the Opry?
Well, yeah, they don't all run together because I still get really nervous when I play the Opry just because of the
Yeah.
fact that it's such like larger than I am, this whole tradition. But I got to bring Marcus King on stage for the first time and sing with him on his Opry debut. And I also got to introduce Dwayne Betts, Dickie Betts's,
Yeah.
the late Dickie Betts's son, for his debut. And I've seen friends of mine get inducted, like Gary Muledeer, who is just like this comedy legend that I feel like got his propers when they inducted him. And looking over to my right and seeing Vince Gill sitting watching you side stage is always kind of a pinch me moment. So I just feel really lucky to be in that community where you never know who's going to be there backstage. And I feel that it's right in my backyard in Nashville, but the audience is filled with people who've come from all over the country. So people are taking your music home with them when they leave there.
Absolutely. Well, folks, you got to come to the shows because it's not just the Opry, but you've also done, Bonnaroo and Austin City Limits and Newport Folk Fest, all the big ones you can imagine, and played with Tim McGraw and Kelly Clarkson and Sheryl Crow. Like, it goes on and on. So don't miss your chance for these two shows, Friday and Sunday. Cool. Anything else you want to say before we hop off here?
No, I just really appreciate you helping me get the word out about these shows. The hometown shows are always really special. And I have an incredible opener who's traveling with me. His name is Fancy Haygood. So if you do come to the shows, make sure you don't miss him because he's one of the finest writers and artists in Nashville.
Fancy
And
Haygood.
Fancy Haygood. Yeah.
And of course, Maggie Rose, not to be confused with Maggie Rogers, is from around here too, from Easton, Maryland. So
That's
you
right. I always forget that.
you should reach out to her and do like the Two Maggies tour when you're in the area.
Yes, I love her vibe. And yeah, I do. I've definitely been introduced as Maggie Rogers before.
Maggie Squared, there's different ways you could brand it, but there you go. Food for thought.
Yeah.
All right, cool. But this is Maggie Rose at Rams Head in Annapolis Friday and Birchmere, Alexandria, Virginia on Sunday. So get your tickets now. Hey, thanks for doing this.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.